Hi, I'm Mark Punyanitya, co-founder and CEO of Phenomics. I'm a biomedical engineer, and for the last 20 years, I've been doing global multi-center clinical trials, specifically for quantitative imaging. And there, let's see if you can now see. Yes, it looks like the screen should be the slides. Today, I'm going to talk about what I view as the ultimate quantified self. Seeing a lot of what's happening now with next generation healthcare and all the real world data, social determinants of health, I've been really thinking what is missing or what else can be done, given a lot of the new research developments that have been going on for quite a while in the clinical trials arena. So even looking back, I think this was 2015, a lot of questions have come up on what is the actual utility of the annual physical exam? How much information can you get from it? Do you actually need it? Different views from different types of doctors, whether it's an endocrinologist who might not need to actually physically touch and palpate you, to an orthopedic who might want to push and pull. Opinions vary. So, taking a look further at what might comprise the annual physical exam as we know it, either the annual physical or more of a wellness visit, slight checkup. Looking at the differences of, let's say, medical history, reviewing some existing lab work or medication review as a limited scope versus actually going in and getting tests done. Well, what else can be gathered from that? What are we asking of the doctor? What is going on? What happened to me if it's post acute symptom or an incident? And how can you help me? What should I do in the future? Those are all changing now with uh, patient education, educated consumer, the access to information, and what can we do with it? So, what is going to be the future of our health checkup? Is it something like the digital twin, whether it's the actual digital footprint, social media, etc., or is it actual digital signals, digital diagnostics, digital therapeutics? Looking at even very recently, I think a few weeks ago, Babylon Health coming out with their health check. This is I think it's AI bot enabled, basically, in my opinion, the oral medical history transcribed to quote unquote build your 3D digital twin. As an imager, I've got a little bit of a question about that 3D digital part, but here we go looking at, it's an actual chatbot asking you what's your history of smoking or diet, what's your familial history, etc. And it builds this avatar of your body on the right. Whether or not that's actually looking representative of you, I guess it is for educational purposes, where they will dive into, this is your risk score, this is your considerations for, let's say, lung and heart, etc. Well, I feel there's more that we can do here. Looking at next generation healthcare and a lot of the remote sensoring and monitoring, yes, we can take blood pressure, we can take ECG, we can do a lot of different biosignals. We can actually even move to apps, trackables, and wearables and start to actually have interaction, behavior modification, a lot of other measurements. But that does kind of leave off where and what else can we do inside the body. Superficial biosignals, skin galvanic response. Uh, but yes, we have some imaging devices available, portable ultrasound as an example. First, the laptop size device, the handheld device, and now bring your own device. You can use the Butterfly portable ultrasound transducer and plug it into a smartphone. Somewhat similar for X-ray. The portable cart is the current status, and what's starting to be developed are the portable detectors that then can be paired with tablets, smartphones, and things like that. But what does that extent mean? Because the ultrasound can only go a few inches in. Can we use all this for your family history, screening, actually using it for targeted intervention or monitoring and tracking? Well, in this age of big data and certainly all the other buzzwords of AI, machine learning, deep learning, how do we bring all of that data together, all the multi-omic data, and utilize the analytics to actually gain insight? Well, in seeing this ecosystem of bringing the cloud-enabled Internet of Things, all devices connected all times, being able to measure these things in your real-world environment, let's bring them together and say, how can we combine them? Here is the example to now start to include more detailed imaging, anatomical imaging, functional imaging, all the way down to molecular imaging. The radiomic combined with genomic data yielding clinical insights, and actually then starting to describe healthy and disease conditions. But what I, from my history of doing the clinical trials, look at is how can we include more of the body, the major vital organs and tissues in a much more holistic, if you apply that to technology perspective, where utilizing rapid image acquisition technologies, efficient processing, and the personalization and predictive analytics, can we actually comprise a digital physical exam, something that would be much more representative of the whole body. So in comparing the clinical imaging versus quantitative imaging, you can see on the left in the black and white grayscale images, the typical anatomy focus, subjective diagnostic diagnosis, um, based on the radiologist's expertise or experience. And certainly they are the experts. I am not promoting here AI eats the radiologist by any means, but something that in a quantitative perspective can actually provide them numbers, values, quality, quantity, something that they can utilize their experience, not having to do the more routine, let's say, measurements of things. So on the right, you see the quantitative imaging is biomarker focused, where we're utilizing objective measurements and standard operating procedures so that it is much more quality controlled and the accuracy, precision, reliability, repeatability within and between different scans, scanners, and technologists or radiologists. So here's an example of a technology pipeline where we can combine whole body composition from fingers to toes, looking at your subcutaneous fat, visceral fat, your fat in the liver, the quality of your muscle, from a whole body perspective, left arm, right arm, different anatomical regions, applicable to obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and then further on, fully automated brain and neuro subregions, the heart, cardiac structure and function, the liver, as well as the kidney, pancreas, spleen, and then joints. Again, therapeutic areas and conditions listed below, where not just using imaging as a screening tool, but what about the interplay between the organs? A lot of organ and tissue combinations are starting to become prevalent, not just brain-gut interaction. Liver and heart, a lot of things here where, at least in the US specifically, we don't image these things in a coordinated effort, let alone at the same time. So here's one example of the utility of using imaging biomarkers and this type of approach specifically from the brain. On the left, in terms of the scale, it's the magnitude of the biomarker and then the clinical stage of the disease, where you see the nuclear medicine, PET, tau, PET scanning for amyloid beta and tau plaques as the earliest indicator of disease for Alzheimer's, followed by the structural brain imaging and anatomy. Further down is the actual memory and cognition versus the clinical function. And of course, then, if we can intercept this earlier, we can start to treat it and hopefully improve the course of disease, if not prevent it. So how can all of this work and function in our either current healthcare system or possibly what is to come? We look at this as the MRI is an advanced machine, but we want to utilize it as a dumb machine. We want to remote control it, basically use the scanner for the image acquisition. Have the settings prescribed, the quality, the drift, the reliability of the scanner across different makes, models, software versions, and pull the data off and process it, utilizing processing in the cloud, wherever it may be, enterprise server, and then provide feedback in terms of not just your number, your value on a scale, population level, here's your percentage, here's your stratification, but actually being able to turn it around in more real time to the patient themselves. If you can imagine getting a 5-minute liver scan instead of a 30-minute scan, a 10-minute brain scan instead of a 45-minute scan, And by the time you change out of your gown, maybe pay a copay out of pocket or signing the documentation for, let's say, your employer or a gym, being able to receive a personalized digital report, maybe for education first, but if it's enhanced with augmented reality, being able to actually see, understand not just the features of looking at this data visualization, but taking ownership, emotionally feeling the connection to, wow, this is my body, perhaps with the interaction with your care provider, getting that behavior modification to lead to change. So, given that there are 36,000 scanners in the world performing 125 million scans, we certainly think that this is an opportunity that can really extend the reach, not just for high net worth individuals, quantified self, executive physicals, but really bridging the technology divide and the medical deserts to look at developing nations, remote regions, even in developed countries. I was recently in Paris and learning a little bit about the medical deserts that exist there, and likening that to what I've seen and experienced in the U.S., whether it's in an urban but remote from healthcare setting, or maybe out in the middle of a rural county. This type of imaging technology can change the dynamic from having to travel those 2 hours to the capital city, the academic medical center of excellence, to being able to provide it at the private imaging facility down the street, 15 minutes, 30 minutes away, or even with the advent of some portable MRI scanners, maybe within the retirement community, the corporate headquarters, or the sports arena, not the Olympic Village, let's say. So all of these together really look at applying to uh, increasing the benefits to all of the parties involved in the healthcare system. The patient, for example, might not need the needle biopsy to the gut for a liver sample, for fatty liver, as an example. Uh, Doing the 5-minute virtual liver biopsy could help detect the silent disease earlier and help with intervening diet and exercise, as opposed to having to go further down the treatment regime to pharmacotherapy, bariatric surgery, and the like. Providing the physicians with quantitative data, helping the payers, the policymakers, everybody involved. We want all of the benefits to be not just incrementally progressing, but making the system as a whole finally realize and understand this is what can be done. Um, and the applications. This is not the replacement of a physical exam, but really looking at how the industry is evolving with this next generation healthcare, and who and what are utilizing the remote sensors and monitoring. How can this be beneficial to, let's say, decentralizing the hospital, the real world data, where maybe you don't have to go from your home to have all of these tests conducted? Perhaps it's more the retirement community or the community center. I've heard of the abandoned malls that are being revitalized. Being able to combine these things when all of the remote sensors, the teleradiology, if we're removing some of the physical interaction and going to virtual, how do we get a look at the inside of the body? How do we make that beneficial? And that's where we're looking at applying imaging to meet the needs of the market trends. And can we combine that for, is it the annual physical exam, the employee executive physical, sports medicine, professional athletes, or population health screening and physicals? This is something that, from experience, we can utilize imaging in combination with the other omic data to really look across the lifespan, looking at in utero prior to birth, your annual physical as a child, all the way through older age. And then I've been recently asked about utilizing this as a part of a virtual autopsy package and looking beyond death and what can follow from there. So, in looking at that, I'd like to, I think, end here with my contact information. I certainly have some other images and examples that I can show, but why don't we turn it back to Thomas and take a look at some of the questions? or shall I?
Yeah, no, no, one
Okay, you're back.
second. Yes, here we go. Sorry, I just didn't find the button. Yeah, absolutely, very interesting. And we have some comments and questions. Let me check. Yeah, like Jennifer, she wants to know like what are your customers? So I understand, or she would like to know like is it more B2B what you're
Okay.
doing, or is it B2C? I imagine
So
no.
it's actually B to C. We're looking at the digital exam as our focus and where can it be applied. So if you think, as the slide shows, where can you enhance the exam? The first B of enterprise would be the clinical trials vertical, entry into clinical trials, better patient stratification and selection, as well as moving to, in the middle, we're looking at targeting the imaging facility. So if you were to ask, who do you sell to? In this middle area, the software or platform as a service goes directly to the imaging facility. We enhance their MRI scanners, provide them the latest features and models, even supporting the legacy scanners 7 years back, not having to upgrade. I've heard instances where the main manufacturers might come in and quote a software package for 25,000, but lo and behold, like Microsoft, they might have to upgrade their operating system, becoming $250,000, and then the hardware is 7 years old, another 250,000, then it's capital expense, and on and on and on. The consumer part, I wouldn't necessarily say the end consumer B2C as a pretty picture of your body, but maybe a little bit more the engaged consumer, quantified self, or in conjunction. One example might be maybe your gym subsidizes a $100, $200 body composition scan, where we would be screening for other potential diseases inside your body. And then they're benefiting because that's maybe having you sign up for a year's worth membership, concierge medicine, etc. And this is the difference between inside the US to looking globally. We've got projects where Asia is not just early adoption, it's actually early implementation. And then coming back from Asia to India, Middle East, and Europe. And just last week, starting to speak into South America.
Yeah, I just slide in this one as well. You just answered this, Jennifer, as well. Like, what are your future plans, country, sector, industry? So, yeah, okay. And yeah, James, for example, he wants to know like, where do you see the potential of AI in this?
So with AI, as with the buzzwords of a lot of things, the pendulum swings. It was buying a billion images and thinking we could use all the other data around it to figure out what's in the image. But for us, is certainly applicable, and I'd rather say data science, because for us, what I see is coming from the other end of the pendulum, where it's an imaging biomarker. All of these things that I've been companion could be a companion or collaborative diagnostic, even for pharmaceutical grade development. So to bring that outside of the confines of clinical trials and wrap a different layer on it means that this imaging, when the data sets are done, manually curated, labeled, classified, if you, Thomas, were to get your first scan done, the scientific variable of difference would be, how does your scan vary from the atlas, the database that we have? Not, oh, we're taking your scan and going to predict 20 different variables of how long you're going to live, how fit you're going to be, etc. So step by step, one by one, we build the imaging data set, and then I'd be happy to collaborate and release it over to everybody who's more experienced at combining all of these larger multi-omic approaches.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and then James, he wants to know us like, you think overall care is not managed well enough today? So to say, like, yes, explaining
Well,
all this, there are a lot of opportunities, no?
yeah, I'd say from my own personal experience and from people that I've heard, in general, medical care is not managed well at all. Even some of the physicians that are having to, justify their pre-authorization or get pre-authorization for their diagnosis of a procedure or surgery or something else. It's like there are too many stressors and factors and issues. I certainly believe that education, choice, transparency, all of those things will be what makes the biggest difference. So, being able to provide the tools that make that happen is our goal. And, where it ends up, I guess we'll see. The culture change is the hard part. Maybe not just the education alone.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like Dominique. She writes like, are the people ready for this? Thinking about the non-nerds, you know, or she thinks like this is very futuristic. Or what do you can say about
Well,
this?
in combination, I can see where it may be, right? If I'm sitting here talking about it as, yes, you'll have this digital exam where you're not going to have to go see anybody. We just transfer the data and boom, boom, boom. But if you take it back to the benefits to the healthcare system, let's separate them out. As a patient, would you rather get stuck in the gut with a needle or have a 5-minute liver scan? Plain and simple. And is that
Sure.
understandable? Is that a understandable enough question for an end user, not a medically educated consumer, to be able to make a choice? Okay, let's tack on then for the radiologist. Well, they get quantitative data and be able to make better judgments and not have to use just the anatomy and only a few tools. So to me, to combine all these potentially just incremental, or maybe they're not incremental, they're just visible to a certain set of people under a certain light. And then when we combine them, I think that's when we end up being looking futuristic. But this is here and now. We just set up a facility in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, okay. And I think this is a good closing question. I believe, like, what countries, you mentioned it before already, by the way, but what countries are you currently working with, biggest potentials? And yeah, e.g. Africa, I believe, Dominic, you're referring to Abayomi, you know, the presentation we had before. So
yeah, yes. So that is very interesting. And I didn't specifically mention Africa because actually it was even just last week I was speaking to somebody that has connections to Algeria, Morocco, and starting to look at potential entry in that direction. I think that actually has a very big impact when if you can envision what I'm talking about as the software, the platform as a service, that proves out, I guess, the model on existing MRI scanner infrastructure as what can be done, how can this be utilized? But to take it to the next step, to access an even bigger marker, that remote region, whether it's developing nation or industrialized nation that has the medical desert, I think the potential for a portable MRI scanner, something that has a low dollar price tag, that can go in the back of a pickup truck as opposed to a semi truck, and can be in multiple facilities, extends the ability to be in the desert, the jungle, and the mountains, and provide not just field imaging data, the portable ultrasound or X-ray, but full body, multi-organ, multi-system, multi-disease screening. That I think is where the biggest impact comes, and I think that's honestly for us why we're not just interested in the early adoption, high net worth individual type. It's that proves the concept, that proves exemplary human performance if it's professional athletes. But how can we take those tools and make it ubiquity of technology, getting it to spread further and faster, and hopefully embark on those billion patient studies that some people are starting to talk about. That's real future.
yeah, cool. Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting what you're working on. And yeah, I think the time is already over, like punctual 8 o'clock.
Perfect.
So yeah, I believe that was it. So yes, thanks. Yeah, people are chatting, still chatting. Thanks for this. Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. It was a great pleasure having you with us, Mark. And
You
really
all?
looking forward what's coming next, you know, because our speakers on healthetia, we stay in contact anyway and see like progress, and perhaps, yeah, hopefully having you next year again with an update what you're working on.
Would certainly welcome that.